you get a lot of money in people's hands and you don't have very many goods, prices go up. You can do all kinds of things.
It is no secret that everything from groceries and utilities to transportation costs and rent is now more expensive than it used to be. The growing increase in the price of goods and services has left many people with more questions than answers as to when all of this will end. In this video, we will explore the current state of inflation and what the future holds for consumers. Inflation is primarily fueled by too much demand relative to supply. According to former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke's definition in his macroeconomics textbook, inflation occurs when the aggregate quantity of goods demanded at any particular price level is rising more quickly than the aggregate quality of goods supplied at that price level. But what causes demand to outgrow supply? There are a few reasons why this happens. These include how much an economy produces, how much money people have or can easily get their hands on, and what people think will happen next. Supply shocks. Inflation naturally happens because of supply shocks. Supply shocks are significant disruptions to an important economic input like energy. For instance, if a conflict causes several oil refineries to cease producing oil, the cost of energy goes up. The cost of other goods will rise as well because nearly every other commodity requires energy to produce. Cost-push inflation is what is meant by this. According to theory, a decline in a goods supply should result in a rise in price, fewer consumers, and a change in the equilibrium. Even yet, the situation is more difficult in reality given the limited number of alternatives available to customers. A supply shock might trigger a long-lasting rise in cost. It might also be because the supply shock is unpredictable as to when and whether it will terminate, or because the first price increase alters people's expectations of future inflation. Money supply. There is also the demand side of the equation. An increase in the supply of money in circulation will cause inflation. With more cash in the pockets and bank accounts of consumers, they will find reasons to buy new things. But unless the supply of goods and services has increased in the meantime, consumers' increasing demand for products will simply lead to increased prices, which means inflation. On occasion, experts claim that inflation increases when there are too many people seeking too few things. This phenomenon is also known as demand pull inflation. Expectations and spirals. In many models of inflation, an unexpected rise in the money supply rather than an increase in the cash supply is what causes inflation. It seems to reason that supply will rise to keep up with demand if everyone is aware that demand will rise as a result of more money in circulation. It is the unexpected increase in demand or decrease in supply that sets off inflation. Similarly, how much inflation people expect affects how much inflation we get. As prices increase, workers are not able to buy as much with their salaries, so they will bargain for higher wages to maintain their standard of living. But if businesses expect this wage increase, they will raise prices further and the cycle will continue. How does raising interest rates help inflation? Interest rates are a tool used by central banks to manage demand and inflation. They will increase their target short-term interest rate if inflation is high. Reduced demand for products and other purchases is the result of higher interest rates, which make borrowing expenses less appealing to individuals and businesses. Demand must be reduced to bring supply and demand into balance, since excess demand is what drives inflation, which releases pressure on prices. The primary method used by central banks in the United States to manipulate interest rates is known as open market operations. The Federal Open Market Committee of the Fed determines its target interest rates, and the Fed then makes purchases and sales of bonds and other assets to influence the short-term interest rate and cash flow. What actually caused the current inflation? Both supply and demand considerations are used to explain the present inflation. The COVID-19 epidemic produced workforce shortages and shipping issues, and the invasion of Ukraine also contributed to an increase in oil and food costs. Numerous commodities saw unanticipated price increases due to the cost of energy and transportation, and the increase extended to other areas of the economy. In order to help people and businesses deal with lockdowns and job losses during the epidemic, numerous nations distributed significant quantities of money to them. As a result, there was more money in circulation which might have contributed to inflation. As a result of customers having money in their wallets during the epidemic and being unable to spend it on services like dining out and other products and services, demand for tangible commodities increased tremendously. Nobody genuinely knows how much each of these elements contributed. However, according to research done by economists at the New York Federal Reserve, demand-side variables will account for 60% of the price increase in 2021, and supply-side factors will account for 40% of it. When should we expect things to change? When prices will decrease is not immediately clear, but it won't be long. Estimating significant contributors, such as when global supply chain concerns will be resolved and when the Federal Reserve's interest rate rises will slow the economy sufficiently to cut inflation, is necessary to determine when prices will begin to decline once more. Overall inflation has eased since the summer as supply bottlenecks have improved. The national average price of gasoline was $3.25 a gallon on Tuesday, a price reduction of more than 50 cents a gallon from earlier months according to OPIS, an energy data and analytics provider. Prices reached an all-time high in mid-June last year at a record of $5.02 a gallon. Prices of used cars, which was a major cause of inflation in 2022, fell for the fifth straight month, slipping in November to their lowest levels since September 2021. Although they are still up more than 40% from before the pandemic, many travel-related prices also declined in November as well, with flight tickets dropping down 3% from October and car and truck rental prices dropping 2.4%. However, prices of groceries picked up about 0.5% from the previous month, largely as a result of increases in prices for bakery product and fruit and vegetables. Inflation still remains relatively high and has spread to more labor-intensive services as wages surged in a labor market where demand for workers exceeds the number of unemployed people looking for employment. Low unemployment and salary increases are intensifying consumer spending, which has remained strong despite rapidly rising prices. Fed Chair Jerome Powell in a recent speech said price transfer services, not including housing, reflected inflationary pressures in the broader economy and were important in gauging inflation's future path. Because wages make up the largest cost in delivering these services, the labor market holds the key to understanding inflation in this category, he said. November's Consumer Price Index report offered possible signs wage pressures could be easing. An increase in the price of services apart from house and health insurance contributed less to core inflation in November compared with the prior 2 months. Eating out, a service for which labor composes a relatively large share of cost, slipped 0.5% in November from the previous month, a marked reduction from the 0.9 average pace from June to October as price gains for both sit-down meals and fast food eased. However, recreation services jumped 1% in November from the previous month, the sharpest increase since lockdowns eased in May 2020. Prices for haircuts and other personal care services rose 1.4% in November from October, the biggest gain since July 2021. The labor market seems to be the last place that could make it difficult for inflation to come to an end. Home sales have fallen as mortgage rates increased. An easing of housing costs and slowing pace of price increases for goods will likely cause inflation to go down in the coming months. For the next 6 to 12 months, we can expect to see a significant reduction in the prices of goods and services, even without moderation in wage growth, which will possibly mark the end of the current inflation.